Race and diversity are playing historic roles in some key midterm elections. The New York Times found more than 200 candidates are Black, Hispanic, Native American or multiracial. There's also a record number of women, people of color and LGBTQ candidates running this year. All of this comes as Georgia candidate Stacey Abrams could become America's first Black female governor. Earlier, she spoke to CBS This Morning about her campaign and her Republican opponent, Brian Kemp.
I tell people to look at my record. I'm the only candidate in this race who's worked across the aisle, who's gotten A ratings from the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and the Friend of Labor Award. I'm the only one with detailed plans on how we improve access to education in the state of Georgia, how we cover 500,000 people with access to affordable health care, and how we create good-paying jobs across the state of Georgia. My opponent doesn't have a record. What he has is rhetoric and failed policies and failed behavior. And so I think when people look at my record and they look at my plans, they will know that I'm the only candidate who has their best interest at heart.
But as you know, voters don't often do a deep dive. They look at the headlines, and Brian Kemp is saying about you that this is a farce, this is a distraction. There are countercharges back and forth. What do you do to keep people focused who are just sort of sick of both sides now at this point?
Well, I would say this. I think that what's happened over the last few months is that Brian Kemp has consistently behaved in a way that is not worthy of this office. And what voters have seen is not a back and forth. They've seen one person who throws out desperate attacks, who has to basically blame everyone else for his failures. And I've run a consistent campaign. I've never pointed a shotgun at anyone. I've never blown anything up. I've been talking about the same three issues since the day I launched this campaign. Good jobs, good health care, and good education for our kids.
For more on this, we want to bring in BuzzFeed politics reporter Darren Sands. He joins us from Atlanta. Darren, what do you make of some of the demographic changes? Because if you listen to Stacey Abrams, she's not selling herself as the potential first female Black governor in America. She's saying, look at my record. I want to, create jobs and improve education. So nationwide, how is what could very well be a historic midterm election, how is it being translated?
Well, it's good to be with you, Errol. I think one of the things you have to remember about Georgia is that long time ago, they sort of figured out that the demographic changes were going to be such in Georgia that there wasn't going to be a white majority in the state anymore. So I think the years 2040, I believe, that there will be more people of color in Georgia than there will be white folks. And I think what the impact that that's had on this election in particular is that Stacey Abrams is making a very direct appeal to people of color in the state. What she's doing is saying, hey, look, we can do these things in our state. And we don't have to deal with opposition to things we want, like a Medicare expansion and better jobs and better wages. And so she's making these direct appeals, understanding that demographics are such that it appeals to someone, a candidate like this, who is a younger person of color, and someone who is having, I think, an impact here. There's lots of excitement on the ground, especially about her candidacy and what can happen on Tuesday. And so I think she's been very direct for a long time in planning this candidacy and planning her campaign, that's the direction that things were going.
And we're just looking at some of the latest polling showing that with Brian Kemp slightly ahead, but within the margin of error, this race for governor is essentially a statistical tie. So Stacey Abrams is, of course, trying to get out the Democratic base, but she also seems to be appealing to general Georgia voters. And I was at a rally with President Trump yesterday as he was stumping for Kemp. Kemp was doing the same thing in kind of vilifying his opponent, but saying he is the one who's going to improve security, improve immigration. So when it comes down to policy, is there any identifiable differences on what Stacey Abrams is offering versus her Republican opponent and Republicans in general this midterm election?
Yeah, there's lots of differences. I think one of the things, obviously, like I mentioned, is the Medicare expansion. She likes to talk about that linking to almost every other policy area that Georgians care about. What she's also running on is on the idea that she's got experience doing lots of different things in her life. So she talks about being an author. She talks about being a small business owner. She talks about being a political organizer. And she's saying that all of these experiences in her personal life, she wants to bring that to the governor's, that corner office in the state office, in the state house rather, and she's framing herself as a person who is going to understand every Georgian's experience. She comes from a lower middle class background from Mississippi. She went to Spelman College here in Atlanta. And what she's saying is that she wants to appeal to voters who are maybe a little bit disenchanted by some of the things that Republicans are doing in Washington. And she is appealing, I think, directly to moderates by saying that, look, we're not going to be anti-business in this state. Obviously, Georgia is a place where there are lots of large corporations. And she's, I think, in a way, talked about her experience in the legislature as something that is going to, I think, not just attract Republicans, but make people realize that she's going to work across the aisle to get some things done. So she's got lots of challenges, but I think that's been one of her advantages is framing her candidacy in that way.
We were seeing some footage of Oprah Winfrey stumping for Abrams. Some of the criticism from Republicans, and especially in rural places, so if Abrams is trying to attract over these folks in the middle, is that, you can bring in high-profile celebrities, but it may not resonate with your typical Georgia voter. Is there some risk in bringing in big names like Oprah? Some of the comedians are making the joke that, oh, man, if someone sees Oprah's at their door, you'd expect to win a car, not get a Stacey Abrams pamphlet. But could that backfire?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it will. I think at this stage, what's happening is that people are trying to just drive turnout, and turnout is the name of the game at this point. I think most voters have made a decision as to who they're going to vote, and if they've made that plan to vote. And I think what Oprah does is really lend a cachet to her campaign, sort of the celebrity aspect of it. It gets people talking. It gets people, I think, excited and talking about not just the candidates, but what people can do leading up to Election Day, to whether it's texting voters. I was at an event last night with the Collective PAC, which they elect Black candidates up and down the ticket in different states around the country. And they had an event, a brunch here in Atlanta yesterday, where people were just texting voters over an app called Hustle. And so you see people doing things like that, people signing up for door knocking shifts, people signing up to make calls. So, I mean, what that does in politics at this point is help drive turnout, much like President Obama's appearances do in these states. But it also gets people sort of in tune with this idea that you can do more than just vote, if that's something that you want to do.
All right, Darren Sands with BuzzFeed. Great to chat with you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Errol.